Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, I'm John from HTN and welcome to HTN Now, the latest edition of our online event series. For this session, we welcome Jamie Innes, the Product Director in Healthcare, for a session on virtual awards, keeping it simple for ICSs. This session is being recorded and will be made available at a later date. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into the chat and there's time for a Q&A at the end. I'll now like to hand over to Jamie, and if you're ready, Jamie, I think let's get started, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, John. Good morning, everybody. So as John said, I'm Jamie Innes, the Product Director in Healthcare, and thank you for taking the time to join this session. Today we're going to be discussing various different approaches to the delivery of virtual awards and demonstrate how NHS organisations can deploy very effective virtual awards in a very simple fashion. As part of today's agenda, there's a broad array of different areas that we're going to be covering. We'll be recapping some of the current challenges that NHS organisations are facing, how virtual awards are evolving, and some of the standards from NHS England for virtual awards. As part of this, we'll also explore some of the different requirements for NHS providers to consider as part of the delivery of virtual awards, ensuring that key features and functionalities included for patients and healthcare professionals. We'll then discuss and provide a brief demonstration of different virtual ward monitoring solutions and approaches, including the ability to continuously monitor patients using wearable devices, which provides new opportunities for NHS providers to change the way that they support patients on virtual wards and the types of patients that they also refer onto virtual ward programmes. And then at the end of the session, we'll also invite questions from the audience. Firstly, I just wanted to briefly introduce In Healthcare, as some of you may not have heard of our organisation. We are a provider of digital health solutions across the UK, and we support over 2 million patients using our digital health platform. We support over 50 NHS trusts in England, the 5 health and social care trusts in Northern Ireland, and we also have a national agreement with National Services Scotland to deliver remote monitoring services across the 14 health boards within Scotland. In Healthcare, we've worked with our customers to develop over 100 different digital services across a wide range of different clinical specialities. And these are used to support patients in their own homes, but also in challenging environments such as care homes. We support a wide variety of different long-term conditions, but we also appreciate that every NHS organisation is different, so we work with our customers on developing pathways that are bespoke to their local populations and requirements. As part of the delivery of services within In Healthcare, we aim to keep things simple from a patient's perspective and allow them to receive all of their remote monitoring information and support through a single interface and through a single consistent delivery method. And In Healthcare, we believe that patients should be front and centre of the design of digital health services, and we ensure that all patients can be part of a digital health pathway by providing patients with multiple different communication channels from which they can receive information and provide results and responses back to their healthcare professional. And patient-centred design is a really important philosophy that we follow in healthcare. And whenever we're designing digital health services, we always consider the patient and the impact that the service is going to have on the way that they access care. And if the introduction of a new digital service does not improve the way that patients access care or information, then it will ultimately fail and patients will revert back to previous ways of working. You always need to consider the motivation for the patients and not just purely focus on the healthcare organisation, its efficiencies. I just wanted to now give you some indication of the breadth of services that In Healthcare currently provides across the UK and the areas that we currently have presence. As I mentioned, we deliver services across Scotland, Northern Ireland and across major towns and cities in England. We're working with some areas on the regional deployment of our platform across large geographies. For example, in Scotland, where we're working with National Services Scotland, we're collaborating with each of the different health boards across Scotland to standardise and deploy best practice to individuals across the region. And this approach allows organisations to share resources and learnings across pathways so that they're not reinventing the wheel. And the deployment of digital health services can be scalable so that all organisations and patients in that region benefit. So now that I've provided a bit of background to everybody, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the current challenges that are being faced by NHS organisations. Now, as we're all aware, there's a perfect storm of issues currently being faced with increasing demand across the spectrum, challenges in recruiting staff in health and social care, and patients with more complex multiple long-term conditions that require additional support. NHS providers are currently facing winter pressures like those never faced before, with many providers facing challenges in discharging patients from their care to free up acute bed space. Anecdotal feedback that we've had from one local acute is that they have 30% of their bed capacity currently awaiting discharge, with another local acute advising that 300 beds are currently full with patients awaiting discharge. And that capacity is urgently needed to support patients who are attending A&E, but also to support the backlog of appointments where there's capacity to perform procedures, but a shortage of beds for those patients to be placed into following the completion of those procedures. And this dramatic shortage of beds at a time of increased pressure on the NHS is preventing many providers from working through their backlog of appointments from COVID, causing the backlog to actually grow in size. And in addition, we're witnessing the knock-on effects of a lack of bed capacity with delayed transfers of care, a major headline recently with ambulance services stretched at capacity. And we're witnessing the response times for Category 1 and Category 2 calls exceeding their expectations. And this challenge is something that requires a redesigned approach to the way in which we deliver care to patients, allowing NHS providers to change their operating models and supporting patients in different care settings through new technologies. The digital transformation of healthcare is something that in healthcare we've been working on for more than a decade. And in that time period, we've worked with healthcare organisations in redesigning more than 100 different digital health pathways, supporting healthcare professionals and patients in delivering care in different ways. And like all industries over the past decade, the way in which we consume healthcare services has dramatically changed. And since the COVID-19 pandemic, it's forever changed, with citizens expecting and demanding different ways of receiving access and treatment from their healthcare providers. NHS providers now have the opportunity to embrace this change and use new technologies to engage with patients in ways that a few years ago would have been thought impossible. And to provide you with some real-world examples of that, I've got some recent customer projects which demonstrate some of the outcomes that digital health services can have for healthcare professionals and patients. For example, in Norfolk, we run a COPD and heart failure service with Norfolk Community Healthcare, which has seen tremendous outcomes. An evaluation saw an 88% reduction in bed days and 89% reduction in A&E attendances when compared to previous years, and in addition, a 65% reduction in GP visits associated with patients on the programme. Recently, we've worked with Surrey Heartlands on developing a blood pressure at home monitoring service which, when initially evaluated, showed fantastic outcomes for patients, with 53% of patients moving from high to normal blood pressure within 5 months of being activated on the pathway. And this service has now been used by over 3,500 patients, with approximately 10 patients added every single day. Importantly, for many digital health services, there are cohorts of patients who reside within care homes, and many individuals who reside within care homes require frequent visits from healthcare professionals. And a great example of a service that we've developed related to care homes is SBAR with County Durham and Darlington Foundation Trust in the North East. We worked with that organisation to develop a digital SBAR solution which allows care home staff to provide a consistent and concise set of observations and information to a single point of access team who can then review that information and determine the most appropriate resource to go out and visit that patient and the appropriate next course of action. And this service has seen dramatic reductions in the number of unplanned admissions from care homes and allowed healthcare professionals to determine the best resource to allocate to certain patients based upon observations and a consistent set of information from care home staff. And this ensures that resources are appropriately used across the organisation at a time when resources are under increasing pressure. And then finally, I just want to talk about our oximetry at home service. Now, this was deployed throughout Wessex during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this service was the largest oximetry at home deployment across the country, with over 25,000 patients being deployed on the service to date, and various evaluations demonstrating its effectiveness across multiple providers in the region. The evaluation that I'd just like to highlight from Sussex Health and Care Partnership demonstrated the impact that this digital health intervention had on patients who used the service. And what it demonstrated is that patients feel more assured and in the knowledge that healthcare professionals were routinely reviewing their measurements and able to act in the event of a deterioration. The service demonstrated tremendous savings on local health and social care services that would have received increased contact and activity from patients at a time when resources were stretched and dealing with the tremendous strain of the pandemic. The oximetry at home service has led on to many digital health innovations with our customers and also paved the way for the delivery of virtual wards within NHS providers. Virtual wards, by their definition, are designed to support patients who would otherwise be in hospital and prevent readmission or to support early discharge out of hospital. As the winter approaches, NHS providers are ambitiously working to deliver 2,500 virtual ward beds across England, supporting patients with a wide range of different conditions. And what is really interesting to see from our experience over the past 6 months is how providers have expanded from the NHS England targets of respiratory and frailty into developing virtual wards for other patient cohorts which have had significant impacts on their local bed capacity. We're witnessing many providers naturally expand virtual wards to deliver services that will benefit their local population and in which they're seen unlocking the biggest number of physical beds within their organisation. And a couple of those different virtual wards are listed on this page that we're seeing NHS providers expand into. The guidance from NHS England when setting up these virtual wards is that they should make use of new technologies and to have clear criteria for the step up and step down of patients within their caseload. In addition, NHS England have expressed a minimum requirements for providers to ensure that they're present within their virtual ward, and this ranges from the use of NHS numbers as a single identifier through to the use of SNOMED codes for reporting and integrating data back into various clinical systems. And these are requirements which you need to ensure are met within your virtual ward programme. And what is important is ensuring that your technology can be adapted and scaled to meet these initial requirements, but also new capabilities in the future as virtual wards evolve and we enhance them to meet new conditions and challenges faced by NHS providers. Ensuring that your technology supports different integration with clinical systems and different patient cohorts is key, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So one element that we need to be mindful of when deploying virtual wards is there's still a big digital divide across much of our population, and the technologies and devices that we all take for granted and use continuously on a daily basis are not accessible or used by large proportions of the population. Some of these individuals are the highest users of NHS services, and recent stats from Ofcom and other publications demonstrate the stark difference in access to technologies across different areas of the population, with many individuals at risk of being disenfranchised and excluded from digital health services. This is therefore why it's vital when designing and developing digital health services for providers to ensure that their solutions are inclusive, that they're not excluding patients. Our approach when working with NHS providers is to always identify the different cohorts of patients who access and use the services, and to ensure that we're not excluding anybody from the service by using a full range of different communication channels which complement and ensure that patients have equal access. For example, we provide options such as video conferencing, smartphone applications, an online portal, text messages and automated phone calls, which only require individuals to have access to a landline to be able to participate. By providing patients with choice and the option to participate, you'll be amazed at the range of patients that take up digital services. And to give you an example, we learned from our oximetry at home service during the pandemic that there were experiences that we've brought forward into our virtual ward programme. And some of the key learnings around keeping it simple for patients and assuming that not all patients are familiar with technology and that it's really simple for patients to provide their information, and by providing them with different communication channels. So we've identified, as mentioned above, large proportions of the population don't have access to various technologies. And what we found with our oximetry at home service is that 25% of the patients on that programme still chose to use an automated phone call, which demonstrates there's still large demand for individuals to access these services who maybe don't have access to the latest technologies. Next, we move on to integration. So integration is king, and ensuring that data can be shared between different clinical systems and getting to the hands of healthcare professionals without manual entry is vital. This type of integration delivers massive efficiencies and ensures that data is available across the health system. And without integration, virtual ward programs will not be able to deliver real efficiencies for healthcare providers and ensure that regardless of where the patient is treated within the health service, that there is the latest information available for the healthcare professional without the need for them to access a separate system. Whenever we're designing a digital service and the topic of integration comes up, we always look to define a set of goals for the integration in terms of what data items, what systems, and how it will be achieved. And this often means that you need service providers to have a number of different integration options at their disposal, including direct integration with national NHS systems such as the Personal Demographic Service or MESH, but also with widely used clinical systems such as EMIS Web and System 1. And an example of a recent project with a healthcare provider, we've been working with City Healthcare Partnership and the Yorkshire and Humber Care Record to ensure that whenever there's a patient admission, discharge or transfer at any of the local acute organisations, that community provider has full visibility and can use this information to activate or pause any digital health services that the patient's currently on. And this integration is using the latest FHIR messaging standard, and it's a great example of local systems sharing data to the benefit of patients and healthcare professionals. Now, the good news about virtual walls is that the delivery of oximetry at home monitoring services during the pandemic has proven the technology for virtual walls exists, and that the technology is ready to now be used to meet the next challenge that the NHS is facing in freeing up capacity in hospital beds. COVID-19 has had a dramatic impact on the adoption of digital health technologies to support patients across the NHS and speeded up the process of digitisation that was already taking place. Almost overnight during the pandemic, the NHS was faced with the challenge of how to support its existing caseloads of patients without face-to-face contact, and digital has become a de facto approach to support large cohorts of patients with the adoption of video conferencing and different digital solutions to support patients and healthcare professionals. Traditionally, long-term conditions such as COPD and heart failure included some elements of remote monitoring to identify early deterioration and support patients with exacerbations. However, the success of remote patient monitoring during the pandemic is now supporting the expansion of the technology into new areas such as cardiovascular and respiratory. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, and to support the challenges that the NHS is facing in reducing the backlog and managing to increase its caseloads of patients with more complex conditions, we're going to have to see more and more introduction of remote patient monitoring technologies and more patients on virtual ward programs across different conditions. And continuous monitoring technologies allow for the introduction of virtual walls, which will transform the way in which patients are discharged from hospitals, even when they have much more complex care needs. And there'll be a much greater emphasis on proactive monitoring and intervention to reduce the number of patients being admitted to hospital, or at the very least reducing the average length of stay. And a great example of where we're evolving and enhancing services to meet new clinical needs is our respiratory virtual ward programme, which we've recently developed and deployed with a number of our customers. This programme builds upon the great work in the oximetry at home services and provides support for patients with conditions such as asthma and COPD. As part of the respiratory programme, patients will be providing all the measurements needed to calculate a NEWS2 score, and this uses a baseline to monitor the patient against. These programmes are designed to not only spot deterioration and support remote triaging of patients, but also to provide patients with more education and guidance around their condition. And this is designed to support patients in taking control of their condition and providing them with the tools for self-management. And at a high level, I'll just provide you with some information on how the virtual ward respiratory programme works. Initially, the patient is added from the spine. Important information such as the patient's registered GP practice is captured so that it's visible and can be used for integration later on. The patient is referred onto the service and information is captured such as any bespoke patient thresholds and the method by which the patient wishes to be contacted. The patients receive onboarding messages from the system and then receive their notifications to input information based upon the frequency set in the pathway or against their patient. And that's a really important point that with a lot of virtual ward programs, you want to be able to step patients up and down in terms of the frequency of monitoring. And it may start off that all patients receive a standardised set of care, but then you may wish to invoke additional monitoring periods based upon deteriorations that they're seeing the patients having. Once the patient inputs their results, and those results are checked against thresholds and algorithms such as NEWS2, And then if relevant, alerts are raised for clinical teams to investigate and displayed in a dashboard so that it's immediately visible to the teams in the virtual ward. And from here, patients go into a cycle until they're discharged from the pathway. So one of the key elements to a virtual ward is a dashboard, providing clear visibility of all patients on the caseload, but in addition allowing for prioritisation and identification of those that require urgent review. And these types of dashboards can be customised for different areas and different views that are required, and also the alerting rules as well. You'll see here we've taken some snippets from our virtual ward respiratory programme demonstrating how the NEWS2 algorithm has been used, but these rules and alerts might need to be changed for different providers and changed for different cohorts of patients based upon their level of acuity. And this is where you need more than just a dashboard to manage these critical patients, which is why we provide alerting and workflows that are designed around these pathways, and it allows for alerts and patients to be risk stratified and filtered into different teams. Workflows can be customised and kick off separate processes such as integration or send information to patients and other clinical teams. You also need to be able to manage the exceptions. And what if patients don't respond, and what if they don't provide their results after a number of attempts to communicate? And this is really key with all virtual ward programs and something that's really important during the design phase. Another key element to virtual wards is devices, but devices don't have to be complicated. And as part of our virtual ward program, we provide a number of different device options for patients. From experience, you need a range of different options for patients, which helps tailor the devices to the individuals, but also helps to reduce the overall cost of delivering the solution. For patients who are not using a smartphone or may not be comfortable with technology, it's advisable to have non-Bluetooth options, which allow patients to enter the results directly into the communication method that they're using, whether that's text messages, automated phone calls, an online portal, or a smartphone app. In addition, Bluetooth devices provide the opportunity to automatically collect results once taken from patients and allow patients to provide results at more regular intervals. And finally, there's a range of other integrated devices that we integrate with and are working with customers to deliver as part of our pathways. I'll talk about these in a bit more detail shortly, but these continuous monitoring devices provide even further options for patients and healthcare professionals, and it's really key when you're designing virtual wards that you appreciate that not one size fits all, and you need to be able to tailor your devices and pathways to individuals and the level of care that's needed for them. When designing your virtual ward program, the best advice that I can give to you is to start small, iterate, and then expand from there. Many digital health services fail because they overthink in the design stage. They expand the scope to what they think they need, and ultimately they never achieve delivery because they get too caught up in trying to build the ultimate solution. And what many organisations miss is the opportunity to gather feedback from service users as to what they actually want and what they need. With virtual wards, NHS providers have got a great opportunity to use existing technologies which are proven and have been demonstrated over the past decade to support patients remotely in their own homes and in care homes. And what's key with this type of technology deployment is to rapidly iterate and to take feedback from those service users to inform the service design. Don't waste lots of time building technology into the process if it's not needed. Start simple and expand from there. And this approach ensures that you can get the service up and running quickly, benefiting the health service, and that you can adapt to new challenges that present themselves once you get the service up and running. We recently conducted a roundtable event with one of our customers to discuss approaches to virtual wards and to allow for shared learning across different areas as to best practice and to discuss different technologies that could support their aspirations. What really struck me at this roundtable with our customers was how different areas are approaching virtual wards, further reinforcing what we already know, that each organisation in the NHS works differently based upon their local population and the resources that are available to them. And this demonstrated the need for virtual ward technologies to be able to adapt and flex to different requirements and to be able to react to different ways of working across their organisations. And this includes the ability to set different monitoring regimes across specialities, but also at a patient level with different escalation routes and different response times for different times and days of the week across those different specialities. One element that we discussed in great detail with our customers at the roundtable was around continuous monitoring technologies. And to support continuous monitoring of patients, we've been working with a couple of different manufacturers, different approaches to be able to support patients using disposable skin patches that are connected to a mobile device that can be used to capture a variety of different vital sign measurements. And in addition, they capture activity such as steps. And also because of a gyroscope, it can also detect falls. These monitoring patches provide continuous vital sign measurements over a 7-day period. And if necessary, the patient's monitoring can be extended with additional patches, or they can be stepped down to alternative remote monitoring technologies that don't require continuous monitoring. These patches include the option for single lead ECG measurements that can provide a wealth of data and allow for the identification of AF. And in addition to disposable patches, there's also a watch that's capable of taking the same measurements, and that can be reused across as many patients as necessary. The device is rechargeable and has a battery life of 5 days. And I now have a brief demonstration of a continuous monitoring view that we've developed showing a range of different results being received from a continuous monitoring patch. The InHealthcare platform receives a continuous stream of data from the device and can display this information within a caseload dashboard or within individual patient records as shown on this page. And this page displays a range of different data points, but we also support the capture of data via Bluetooth devices. And in this example, I was wearing the monitoring patch, but also provided a weight reading via a set of Bluetooth scales, which was automatically received by the platform and displayed to a healthcare professional. The measurements for continuous monitoring devices can be shared with clinical systems, with options agreed for snapshots of data to be shared, and the data can also be used to kick off workflows once the data exceeds agreed boundaries and rules. But this type of continuous monitoring is really for those patients that are at the top end of the acuity spectrum and need that additional support and guidance. For many providers that are deploying virtual wards, they are mainly focusing on those individuals who can manage in their own homes and require not as much support and care. And that's where continuous monitoring might not necessarily be the best option for the vast majority of your patients. And you can start really simple and small with non-Bluetooth devices, automated phone calls and online portals that provide the vast majority of services for your patients. And just in summary, I'd like to thank you all for your time today, and I hope that you found the session useful. In summary, we've discussed how the approach to delivering healthcare within the NHS is rapidly changing through the introduction of new technologies and the use of remote monitoring to allow patients to receive care in their own homes rather than traditional hospital settings. We discussed a bit about NHS England's criteria for virtual wards and the functionality that needs to be in place for virtual wards to be delivered, with provider organisations, including the types of things that you need to look out for in a technology provider. The delivery of virtual wards really presents a tremendous opportunity for NHS providers, but it also does present a number of challenges. And the key to delivering any virtual ward programme is to start small and remember that the technology is only a small part of the overall solution. And that to be successful in redesigning pathways, it's going to require a whole system approach to developing and running virtual wards. And finally, we've conducted with an example from our respiratory virtual ward programme and details of the different types of continuous monitoring solutions that we can provide, including a brief demonstration of our continuous monitoring portal. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the session and open the floor to questions. I hope that you found it informative.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. That was a really interesting presentation. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the chat area and they'll come through directly to us, and we've got some time to go through any questions. If you have any questions outside of this meeting, you can see Jamie's email address on screen, so feel free to reach out to Jamie directly. So it doesn't look like we've had any questions at the moment, so we'll give everybody a minute or two to type any in. Right. And as I'm saying that, questions have started to pop in. So the first question, let me just open this. Well, the first question, Jamie, have you any case studies of how you set up patients up or down the spectrum using different technologies, e.g. continuous monitoring to text?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. As part of some of the different virtual ward programs that we're working with our customers on delivering, they've identified different cohorts of patients that would be suitable for different levels of monitoring. And that's allowed them to identify what stage the patient should be enrolled onto initially, and therefore where they should then, the boundaries from which they should be stepped up or stepped down into various different levels of monitoring and care. And that kind of standard operating procedure and information is really important when you're designing your virtual ward program, because it allows you to identify what should happen in different situations and when you might need increased and enhanced monitoring for patients, or whether it might be then more appropriate to step them down to less intensive monitoring programs, and then when to ultimately discharge them from the program. So that's the sort of work that we've been developing with our customers across a wide range of different virtual ward programs. And we've developed different models for respiratory, frailty and cardiology at the moment.
Great, thank you, Jamie. The next question is, can you give some examples of patients who have been helped by your virtual wards technology? Also, bed days saved by the service, and do you provide support in foreign languages? So 3 questions in one there.
Okay, I'll try and remember all those. So I guess in terms of some examples of virtual ward programs and bed days saved, I think one of the best examples that I can provide is the Oximetry at Home program, where we worked with NHS providers across that Wessex region to deliver a solution that would support patients and avoid admissions. Various different case studies that have been demonstrated through that, but a regional program demonstrated that in the Oximetry at Home program, I think we had around a 4% reduction in A&E attendances when compared to those people that weren't on the program. It might have even been slightly higher than that. And also the mortality rate for patients that were on the Oximetry at Home service was dramatically reduced compared to those that weren't on the service. So there was significant savings demonstrated as part of that, and I know there's a number of case studies on our service and on our website in relation to that. In relation to the question about multiple languages, it's something that we get asked about very frequently from our customers, and we work with them on designing multiple languages into the services if necessary. The route that we've taken with our customers and guidance from our CSO is that we don't provide any automatic translation because there's risks associated with potentially doing that. And whilst there are good services from Google Translate and other things like that, they're not 100% accurate. And therefore, to minimise any risk, we work with providers on getting our information professionally translated into different languages and then able to be built into our pathways and presented to patients and healthcare professionals.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, the next question is, do you integrate directly or through a third-party gateway?
Yes, good question. So we integrate directly with our primary care and community providers such as System 1 and EMIS Web. So we are on their partner programs and we integrate directly with those systems, which gives us enhanced capabilities to be able to share data and extract it from those clinical systems. Also, importantly, it ensures that we can integrate with the community modules for those systems, which is something that many national programs don't allow. For acute systems, we integrate using our REST APIs, and that allows us to integrate directly with those clinical systems. So the short answer is that we don't use any third-party gateways. We just integrate directly with different clinical systems using our APIs.
Excellent, thank you. Right, the next question is, can you see continuous monitoring ECG patches being used a lot, or do you think spot monitoring will be more appropriate for patients discharged from hospital?
It's a very good question. I think from the various different providers that we've worked with over the past 6 months or so on their virtual ward programs, most of them are starting off with spot monitoring. They're looking at monitoring patients maybe 3-4 times a day, depending upon their level of acuity. Continuous monitoring devices haven't really come into their plans yet, and most of that is due to the operating hours for virtual wards. We're seeing different providers take different approaches, with some operating a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 operation. Others are looking at 24/7, 365, and I think at the moment there isn't yet the operational processes in place to support and deliver continuous monitoring, and therefore the vast majority of providers that we're working with are starting off with spot monitoring. But I think over the life cycle of virtual wards, we'll see an opportunity and an introduction of continuous monitoring devices being used, and things like ECGs being provided within that. I think some of the challenges that you face with these continuous monitoring devices is the wealth of data that's generated on the back of them. To give an example, some of those continuous monitoring patches that we are looking at will generate around 1.5 gigabytes worth of data in a 7-day monitoring period. And that's a tremendous amount of data for the system to basically analyse and use. And therefore there needs to be appropriate rules and operational procedures in place around what to do with that, how to escalate, how to spot deteriorations. And I think those are the things that we're working with our customers to develop once they get set up and running with their virtual ward programs.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, does in healthcare deploy technology platform and data integration only, or is there clinical intervention as well?
So as an organisation, we don't have any clinical resources. We have our clinical safety officer and team that we work with from a clinical safety perspective. However, what we have done is partner with various different organisations that can provide clinical input and support organisations with any additional support that they may require. And that ranges from everything from training for patients, either remotely in their own homes or in a hospital setting, through to out of hours or a virtual ward monitoring service. So we've partnered with an organisation, Bionicle Solutions, who provide that capability across the NHS, and they're able to support our customers with any clinical needs that they may require for their virtual ward programs or outside of that.
Great, thank you. Right, the next question is, I imagine that the patient being monitored has access to a portal where they manage results and notifications. Is this how the Bluetooth devices are managed, and how straightforward is the patient experiences regarding the Bluetooth devices?
Yeah, so Bluetooth devices, we currently require individuals to be using our smartphone applications that are available for Android and iOS. Bluetooth devices, what we've done is taken an approach to work with a particular manufacturer. We work with Microlife as a device manufacturer and have integrated their devices into our smartphone applications. And we've kept it really simple and easy so that patients have the option to take the device readings from those devices and use them as part of their submissions back to healthcare professionals. We've chosen Microlife as a manufacturer because they have really good ruggedized devices that last for with a warranty of 5 years, and they also are very cost effective. So we've worked with them as a device manufacturer, but also we work with customers then on identifying whether they can potentially have other device manufacturers that they would prefer and wish to use as part of the service.
Perfect, thank you. Do you have any recommendations for devices in COPD?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers, when it comes to COPD, are focusing on blood pressure, SpO2 and temperature. They're really focusing on how to monitor for signs of infection and obviously exacerbations. We have worked with our customers on using a variety of different Microlife devices to be able to support that. and it's something that we can share more details of after this call if it's useful to individuals, and also put them in touch with some of our customer sites who are more than happy to share their experiences and how they're approaching supporting patients within their virtual ward programs.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie. Right, the next question is, I know you mentioned that you integrate directly with EMIS and System 1. Is In Healthcare open to working in partnership with startup companies to complement their service, such as patient engagement portals or PHRs?
Yes, absolutely. We work with a number of different partner organisations, and as well as getting data back into clinical systems, it's also really important to get the data into the hands of different portals that patients might be using. So we're more than happy to work with organisations who are looking to provide those services to patients and might already have a well-established application and solution that patients are currently using to receive and input information for healthcare professionals.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jamie. And that is all our questions. So if you have any questions outside of this session, you can see Jamie's email address on the screen, so please feel free to reach out. The session has been recorded, and one of our HTN team will be writing an article on it too, so you can watch it back, read it back, and encourage you to share it with your colleagues too. Our next session is at 11 AM this morning. We welcome the University of Essex, and the talk will focus on social prescribing and measuring impact. And then we have two other sessions today. At 1 o'clock, we welcome Barnsley Hospitals. The session focuses on their EPMA project. And then at 3 PM, the focus is on integrating digital care plans with the EPR at Leeds Teaching Hospitals. So that's today. I'll wrap up the session here. Thank you, Jamie, for joining us for the presentation. And thanks to the audience for joining us as well. We've had a great turnout for this one. I think over 90 people have tuned in. So thanks, everyone, and I hope you can join us at 11 AM.